Hi, Seymour. All right, can everybody hear me? That's great. Seymour, can you hear me? And whoever's on the iPhone, I hope you hear me as well. Hi, David. You hearing me? Great. We're just about ready to begin. And at any time, feel free to chime in by unmuting your microphone or messaging, whichever is most comfortable for you. And so we call this class positivity bias. And obviously, we're all trying to learn to be positive in a situation that we don't. Positivity bias implies. You see, the Torah has some strict rules about bias. The Torah gets what we might call extreme. Hi, Alex. When it comes to a judge or another official being bribed, being biased, and the Torah says the bribe would blind the eyes of the wise. Those who would otherwise are no longer able to see things the way they are. So the problem of creating bias, of causing us to see things other than the truth in some cases, or in this case, to causing us to see things differently, to be positively biased, to be biased towards seeing things in a better way, to be biased towards seeing things in a. So as we go along through the stories, through the messages of the Torah that we have here, we'll be able to see and absorb some of these ideas and hopefully. So in the current situation, I don't need to elaborate why people feel challenged. Obviously, those impacted by loss of a loved one obviously are directly suffering on account of this epidemic. But the rest of us also face a challenge, an unprecedented one in this situation. Obviously, we're all thrown off course. Ideas of what we would be doing right now in this spring and what we might be doing in terms of places we wanted to go, things we wanted to accomplish. And that's amplified for some people who particularly invested effort, something that took a lot of planning, something that they waited for a very long time. And now it was finally meant to begin, or the returns were finally meant to come in, or the business enterprise was finally shut down, everything is restrained. So, how do we see the positive there? How do we see the positive? How do we learn to respond to a situation where and something very different takes place? And I'll just repeat for those joining, feel free to unmute anytime to ask any questions or make any comments. So to start off this, be very frustrating and feel like the very exact opposite. I want to start with a brief story, really a message of the Lubavitcher players, if my screen will share properly. Let's try.
Miriam Swertlove is a veteran educator living in Brooklyn, New York. In the late 1960s, she took part in a convention of the Reshape Chabad Women's Organization in Detroit, Michigan.
The Reshape Chabad convention in Detroit, Michigan. Let's say 20 ladies went, figuring out how many children did we leave at home. Baruch Hashem, when I know it. We were supposed to be home by 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Husbands knew what to do with the kids until that time. The Rebbe had geholfen. There was a terrible snowstorm. Airport in Detroit closed down. So all the ladies are sitting at the airport in Detroit, no planes. Miriam Popax is a gesund. She was the head of the Sheikh Chabad out-of-town conventions at the time. Now her daughter, Mrs. Feldman, took over. She went to the telephone and she called New York. Rabbi Klein answers the phone and she says, we're stuck in Detroit. And Rabbi Klein said, ein minut, and he goes to the Rebbe and he comes back and he says, the Rebbe will wissen, was heißt stuck. So Mrs. Popak is explaining the word stuck. So Rabbi Klein, and she keeps asking for quarters, dimes and nickels, ching, 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 ching. None of you know what I'm talking about, right? You have cell phones. And she's explaining was heißt stuck. And he says, the Rebbe was base, was heißt stuck. The Rebbe knows the translation of the word. The Rebbe hat gesagt, as I eat, is keinmal nicht stuck. That a Jew is never stuck. So if you're in Detroit at the airport, you're not stuck. You need to be there. The women ran around the airport giving out Shabbos candles. There are women all over the United States today that are lighting Shabbos candles because the Nishi group, this is what they called us instead of Nishe, the Nishi group was stuck in Detroit, Michigan. I eat is keinmal nicht stuck. If you're somewhere, that's where you're supposed to be.
So obviously a very powerful message. And obviously,
Rabbi, you're muted.
sorry. All right. So a Jew is never stuck. The Rebbe kind of declares in that story we watched. A Jew is never stuck. A Jew is never in a situation that he is. Now, obviously, that's a very empowering statement to make, but what does that actually mean? Well, let's go a step back. What does it mean to be stuck? How would I ever be stuck? Well, I'm sorry?
You can't get out.
Stuck means I need to go somewhere and I can't get there. I was planning to be at a certain location or position or situation, and I'm stuck. I'm in that destination. I'm blocked. I'm prevented. I'm stuck here. But stuck also implies that I really am supposed to be there. Stuck because they're trying to get to the East Coast, and one of them just got home. He's not stuck. He's where he wants to be. So stuck implies that I am supposed to be somewhere else, get somewhere that we want to get to and we can't. That's how probably many, most, or all of us feel right now, or at least sometimes during our day and during our week when we're. But the Rebbe says a Jew is never stuck. If you're in a situation you're meant to be there, there's something there for you. Now this is drawing from a core Hasidism and of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. And that is the idea of what we call in Hebrew Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence. The fact that everything is planned for by So the Talmud mentions something we read in the Torah just over a week ago in Parshas Shmini, where the Torah discusses the birds, the kosher birds. Now, I don't know if this is a stork or something else similar. Be that as it may, in Hebrew it's called sholach and it's not kosher. Well, the Talmud says, why in hayam, which means to pick out fish from the sea. And this bird dips its large beak into the water and catches a fish or a worm or whatever it might be that it eats. But the Talmud goes on to say that this is the definition of what King David says in the Tehillim. Is in the vast oceans, in the vast depth. Because when the bird comes along and wants to catch a little fish or a worm, God is judging and planning which fish will be caught today. God has a plan for everything in this universe. For every situation, for every circumstance, it's engineered as a master plan by God. We tend to think we naturally for it all, but we don't naturally, instinctively feel him as involved, as present, as running the show here and right now. And that's actually true in a sense, we do. But the situations are all engineered by God. The circumstances are actually all engineered by God down to the detail. That little anecdote of the bird teaches us that which fishes where when, it doesn't just happen to be. It's not just because there was a current and he brought that to be. The same is in our lives. God puts us in a scenario, in a location, in a place, in a situation, in a circumstance for a purpose. A group of Jewish women, religious women, are stuck in an airport. Once they realize that it's not about being stuck, they can be constructive about it. They can be stuck in the mindset of being stuck in the attitude that I'm meant to be somewhere else and I'm so frustrated that I'm here. They can't make use of it to be. Well, maybe you wanted to be there and you chose to be there, but God has something in mind for you here. Now, let's go and find it, make the most of that opportunity. Where to find ourselves, where to put ourselves, so that we can then go ahead and do the positive thing that we hopefully are doing. But sometimes God knows something in God's master plan that I or you or both of us have to do right now, and we don't know it. So we need to be brought to the situation where we will. So I see everybody thinking about this, or at least all the faces I can see. It's not an easy or instinctive way of looking at life, but the more we contemplate it, the more we realize that circumstances that are in our, well, then we chose. But circumstances that are be outside of our control, the spilled milk that God spilled, instead of crying, what is this meant to be? We're not stuck here. We're here because that if we are here right now, we're meant to be here right now. Let's point. Another element of the challenge that some of us feel. We're all in a temporary situation. We all go with an attitude and with a perception and a belief and a hope that this is sooner or later, hopefully sooner, go. It's hard to be in a temporary situation and really invest. When's the last time you checked into a hotel room and then baked a cake to bring to your new home, or somebody else moves into the home next door because you're going to be permanent friends and neighbors and you want to be connected? Sometimes that's good, but sometimes it makes it hard to make the most of it, invest in it, be a part of it, and maximize it. I think a lot of us are feeling this right now. Create project X or invest in something else or etc. etc. But this is temporary. Soon I'm going back to work, back to where I wanted to go, back to this right now. Kind of reminds me of my yeshiva days when a couple weeks before the end of a semester, musing about how he's going to shape up and really start to study and really start to learn and to grow. But he's going to do that next semester. And that's a natural response, but sometimes a fatal one. We need to learn to look at life a little differently. And the Rebbe taught this to us in another story. I wanted to show the video of this one as well, but the fellow really draws it out for too long. So in this particular rabbi, a man by the name of Rabbi Glick, who served as a Chabad emissary in Massachusetts, had been proposed to come teach in a school in Australia. And he looked into it, it looked right, and the Rebbe gave his blessing, and he was preparing to move with his family to Australia to take up the position, wrap up his business in Massachusetts. But he was only going to go to Australia after the Jewish New Year, after Tishrei, the month of the holidays. So he ended up in a limbo kind of. He's put everything in order, and he's not going to be starting any new projects. But he's not yet in Australia, so he doesn't have much going on to begin with. And he confided this to the Rebbe. How do we know? The Torah teaches us this. The Torah tells us when the Jewish people were in the desert, and we'll read more about that soon, the Jewish people in the desert, they put up the Mishkan. The Mishkan was the mobile version of the temple that later was built in Jerusalem. The mobile version they had in the desert was where you put the parts together and reestablish that Mishkan in every place that they came to. So wherever they arrived, they set up camp, and they also put up, with all the effort that was involved, this Mishkan, this home. So most people don't realize is that they spent 18 years encamped in one place, well actually 19, and other bursts of time in other places, which meant that some of their stops were really brief. In fact, there were some stops where they spent only one day. But the Torah teaches us, even when they stopped for one day, they built the entire Mishkan, this entire temple, for that one day in this one. Why bother? I'm only here for one day. Let me just get some rest, have dinner, get up in the morning, and get back on the road. But the mitzvah was to establish the Mishkan, to put up this home for God each and every time, each and every place, even for that one day. And that teaches us the importance as well as the potential of time, that's also valuable, and we have to look at it as a position where we are right now to make the most of. When we understand that life is with a purpose, that creation is with a purpose, that God intended something for all of us all the time, that everything is headed somewhere, we should also remember that the same applies to time. No human being, and really no creature, is extra. No location, no product, nothing that. And the same is true for time. There is no day and there's no hour and there's no moment that's extra. God created them for some purpose. Sometimes that purpose might be to rest. Sometimes that purpose might be to take a break. But it's never extra. That time is also a creation of God. That unit of time that is passing by, that day or hour or week or whatever it might be, is also something brought to us by God, and has a value and a purpose in and of itself. And we have to recognize that in each moment, in each time, in each place, we should be trying to maximize. We have one more story, which is, I think, an empowering one, building on the same thought process that we're here for a mission, and wherever we are, we're not stuck, we're on that mission, and every moment should be invested in it in some positive way. Well, a fellow, he's now a well-known rabbi by the name of Simon Jacobson in New York, went past the Rebbe one. The Rebbe would give lekach, which is Yiddish for a honey cake. It's an old Jewish tradition, people to share honey cake before Yom Kippur, as is for a sweet, blessed new year, kind of like the honey on Rosh Hashanah. So the Rebbe would actually give out little pieces of this honey cake to whoever sought his blessing for the new year. And there was a long line. So this particular Simon Jacobson passes by, and his father was in the hospital at that time. And his intention is to ask the Rebbe for a blessing for his father in time for Yom Kippur. And as he comes by, the Rebbe says, when your father will complete his mission, when he'll do the job that he's in the hospital for, he'll be done with it, he'll be able to go. But feeling that this was a very powerful message, conveyed it to his father before Yom Kippur, and that had his father have a total change of attitude. Said, if I'm in the hospital and I'm stuck here and I'm spending Yom Kippur here and I obviously don't want to be here, I should be doing something positive. And he spent the day in conversation, in sharing with other people and for their goodness and their Jewishness overall. So his mission, he was accomplishing his mission that he was in the hospital for. And then he was ready, hopefully soon thereafter, I don't know the details, to move on. And this reminds us that every situation, every scenario is part of our mission. None of us ever should have that experience. But we tend to see those situations as an aberration, as an interruption, as detracting from our mission, from our goals, from our objectives, from what we're trying to do. We were interrupted and we were dispatched. But that's not the case. We have a mission in this scenario where we are right now. And when we do that, when we invest in that, we hasten the end. We get ready for the next step. We accomplish whatever this had to accomplish. A little strange that we find in the Torah. I'm going to try to share my screen again so we could all read this together. Here we go. So this is at the end of the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. The final section, the final parsha of the Torah says, these are the journeys of the children of Israel who left the land of Egypt and their legions under the charge of Moses and Aaron. So this is the end of 40 years in the desert. And the Torah records all the stops the Jewish people made in the desert. As we go down here, they went to Etham, they camped in Piachiros, then they camped in front of Migdol, then they camped in Mara, they camped in Elim, and on and on and on. 42 stops the Jews made in the desert, journeyed from Haradah, camped in Makeloth, etc., etc. So these are the journeys that the children of Israel left the land of Egypt on their long and difficult trek to Israel. But you'll notice the Torah calls these journeys. And that's a little strange, because these are not journeys, these are stops. The Torah says nothing of the road, of the speed of their camels, of what actually happened as they journeyed. The Torah merely lists the locations where they camped, the stops. But for some reason they're calling the stops journeys. And that is an important message for all of us right on the topic we're discussing. There are no stops in life. There are no stops on God's journey, on our trek to the land of Israel, on our trek to better, on our trek to greater, on our mission for something higher. There are no stops. The stops are part of it as well. Sometimes we journey along that road in a conscious way. Sometimes we're held back. But when we stop, that's also a journey. That's also part of the road. We're also headed to the greater, to the objective, to the divine purpose, to the divine reality. So it's up to us to stop and think about that. Everything. We're never stuck, and we're never held back. We're never stopped. This has to contribute somehow. We have to do our mission here too. How will we do that? I can't answer that for most of us. Each of us has to look inside and say, what does this situation present me with? How can I bring something positive from it and move forward in that positive attitude, in that positive manner? How can this stop contribute to my journey? How can I remember that best to use out the time, even the temporary transient time, towards those objectives? This concludes for right now, and then we'll take some questions. I just want to mention that Thursday, the same time, we'll be having another class called Cultivating Character. We will talk about Pirkei Avos. Pirkei Avos is the ethical teachings in the Talmud. And we're going to examine some of them, look at character same time. And the next Monday, we're back here for some more inspirational stories and another step of this whole idea of finding the positive and finding the opportunity wherever we can. I'll stick around as anybody wants to share or ask some questions. And in the meantime, I'm wishing us all a wonderful evening. Yes, Seymour.
As a corollary to what you just spoke to, I'm sure you're familiar with this scholar. In one of his translations, or one of his writings, the phrase that appears in Tanakh, Keli, Keli, Lama Zaftandi, it's an age-old Jewish command, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And Hirsch goes on to say, well, when studying the Tanakh, the original Tanakh, there was no punctuation, nothing to denote. There was just letter after letter after letter. And Lama, why is not for say Lama is in Hebrew, Laman Mem Hey. And to answer the eternal question that Jews have always asked, why by God has thou forsaken me, Hirsch points out that perhaps the word is very Lama. To what purpose? Lama Azafani. Well, for what purpose have you, God, confronted me with these problems? That you appear to in my mind to have forsaken me. So that's the time when we have to look into ourselves and see what the message really is as to why we're obliged to encounter these problems and deep down.
A very powerful message, and that's in the Tehillim in Psalms in chapter 22, where King David says, Keli, Keli, lama zaftani, why hast thou forsaken me? But the word for Hebrew, as you said, the Hebrew word for why, lama, are those three letters which can actually make up lema. For what purpose? So the answer here, if I can, to try to illustrate it. We say in Hebrew, my sketching is not that great, but in Hebrew we would write lama like this. Lama, why? Why have you forsaken me? But this is actually two words, because lamed in and of itself is a prefix which means two. So that would be one part of it. To or for, to what end? And ma means what? So lama, why is have you forsaken me, is answered by saying, for what purpose? For what purpose am I in a scenario where I feel forsaken? We know that God never actually forsakes us. Why am I put into this situation? For what objective? And as soon as I can figure that out, hopefully we'll be able to move past it. Thank you. That was a very inspiring touch to the whole idea.
I read it just the way you wrote it out for me.
I'm sorry.
I read it the way you wrote it out for me to say. It's up on rehearsed bits.
Well, I'm not paying for it, even if you claim I rehearsed it. Any other thoughts before we conclude? Do the same link will work just as well, and on a Monday we will see everybody again. Have a wonderful
Text link, same Zoom link.
yes. Have a wonderful evening and a wonderful week. Let's do our best to make the best of it and not be stuck in it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you. Goodbye.